I am a pilgrim, a wanderer. And a pilgrim is a wanderer with a purpose. A pilgrimage can be to a place or for a thing. And my pilgrimage is for a thing. My pilgrimage is for peace. Now there's lots of facets of peace, and it covers all of them. Peace among nations, peace among groups, peace with our environment, but also peace among individuals, and the very, very important inner peace, which is what I talk about the most. Traditionally, a pilgrim is on foot. I started January 1st of 1953. I've been walking now for 26 years. It's what I'm doing with my retirement years. Back in the end, really, of 1964, I had finished counting 25,000 miles. And I thought that's enough, no more counting. So at that point, I did not stop walking, but I did stop counting. Also, I changed priorities. You see, I have had priorities in my life since I was a child. I established when I was in grammar school my rule of first things first, and began at that time to set priorities in my life. And I've done it, of course, throughout my lifetime. So when I started my pilgrimage, my priorities were walking first, then speaking, then answering mail. But as soon as I stopped counting, I switched priorities, and my priorities became speaking first, then answering mail, and then walking. And those are my priorities today. Now, a pilgrim has no visible means of support, and so I have no money, and I don't accept any money. And I belong to no organization. There is no organizational backing behind me, and all I own is what I wear and the few things I carry in my little pockets. I walk until given shelter, fast until given food. I don't even ask. It must be given. And it is. People are good. There's a spark of good in everybody. No matter how deeply it may be buried, it is always there. Now, one thing that I have always wanted to do was to contact people. And so I began to wear my short tunic with Peace Pilgrim on the front and 25,000 miles on foot for peace on the back. It makes my contacts for me in the kindest way, in the most effective way. You're in a much better position to talk to people when they approach you than when you approach them. And I notice that those who come are worthwhile people. They either are genuinely interested in peace or they have a good, lively curiosity. One more thing, a pilgrim usually has a message, and this one certainly does. It says in one sentence, this is the way of peace. Overcome evil with good, and falsehood with truth, and hatred with love. Now, there's nothing new about that except the practice of it. But I consider it the lesson for today, and so it becomes the message of my peace pilgrimage. Now let me answer the most common question that I am asked. How in the world did you ever get started on a thing like that? I came from a very quiet life. I was born on a small farm on the outskirts of a small town. I had a woods to play in and a creek to swim in and room to grow. And I would wish for all children a situation where they have room to grow, because I look at plants growing up too crowded together, and I realize that they never attain maximum growth. And we humans are a little like that too. Now, I began to make some good choices when I was still quite young. For instance, my rule of first things first. And the golden rule influenced my life when I was quite young. I read it in history. Do unto others as you would have others do unto you, expressed in a lot of different ways. It was really pointing out that every culture had one. Well, it was different from anything I had ever read because it received an inner confirmation from me and affected my entire life. I carried it into high school with my little saying, if you want to make friends, you must be friendly. And that's an offshoot of the golden rule, a recognition that people react according to the influences brought to bear upon them. I still have it in my life today with my little saying, if you want to make peace, you must be peaceful. And that works too. I started to make other good choices. When I was still in what they would call junior high today, I was offered real cigarettes from a package, which I did not smoke, but my friends did. In high school, I was offered all kinds of alcohol, which I did not drink, but my friends did. Now, the test came after my student days. All my friends at that time used both alcohol and tobacco, and there was such a push toward conformity in those days, these days they call it peer pressure, that they actually looked down on me because I didn't. And gathered in someone's living room, I said to them, look, life is a series of choices. Nobody can stop you from making your choices, but I have a right to make my choices too. And I have chosen freedom. And then I went right on to choose freedom from other enslaving things. I chose freedom from negative thinking. Why, you can absolutely destroy yourself through negative thinking. Because every moment of your life you're creating through thought. You're creating your inner conditions, and you're helping to create the conditions around you. I just think about the best that could happen and all the good things I would like to see happen. Those are the things I would like to emphasize. And if someone were to do the meanest thing to me, why, I would just feel the deepest compassion for this out-of-harmony person who is capable of doing mean things. And I certainly wouldn't hurt myself by a wrong reaction of bitterness or anger. And then, about 41 years ago now, 15 years before the pilgrimage started, I chose freedom from unnecessary possessions and meaningless activities. I came out of my empty life of money and things and started to live to give instead of to get. Well, my life just blossomed out. 3 things happened. I attained the great blessing of good health. I haven't had an ache or a pain or a cold or a headache for 41 years. I knew my life work was going to be work for peace, and the whole peace picture. And long after I had finished the physical growing up, and I had finished the mental growing up, I had enough knowledge to get along, I could make my own decisions, and I had finished the emotional growing up. I could get along with people and with myself. I started the psychological growing up, which takes you from the self-centered life into the life that sees you in proper perspective as a part of the whole and works for the good of the whole. You see that every human being is of equal importance. Every one of them has a job to do. Every one of them has equal potential, but we're in very varied stages of growth because we choose as to whether we will even finish the mental and emotional growing up, and as to whether we will begin the psychological growth. And there are so many people who choose never to begin that. But it was doing the psychological growing up and finding inner peace that prepared me for the pilgrimage that I walk today. When I started out, my hair had turned to silver. I looked as today. And I remember when I told my friends I was about to walk across the country, they thought I had taken leave of my senses. But what I walk on is not the energy of youth. It's a better energy. It's an energy that never runs out. When you have found inner peace, you feel plugged in to the source of universal energy. Right there, waiting for people to plug in. And that's what I walk on. Let me give you an example of this amazing energy from someone else's experience. Because sometimes under special circumstances, this endless energy becomes available for just a little while. I was walking out of a town and a truck driver stopped to talk with me. He said, "I heard you say over television something about that endless energy, and I just wanted to tell you that I had it one time." Yes, he said, I was marooned in a town by a flood, and I got so bored that I finally offered to help, and I got interested in getting people out. Why, he said, I worked without eating, I worked without sleeping, and I wasn't tired. But he said, I don't have it anymore. I said, well, what are you working for now? He said, money. I said, that should be quite incidental. You have that endless energy only insofar as you are working for the good of the whole. As soon as you start working for your selfish little self, it's gone. And that's the secret of it. In this world, you are given as you give. And when I realized what human potential really was, what people really are capable of, I looked around me and I said, how sad that most people only scratch the surface of their real potential. No wonder they have problems. No wonder society has problems. And I started talking about human potential and society's potential. Because, of course, the situation in the world around us is always a reflection of the collective inner situation. And so I would like to draw for you a graph illustrating human potential. Now, first, I will draw the life stably governed by the self-centered nature, then the life which is a struggle between the self-centered nature and the nature centered in the good of the whole, which is the psychological growing up, and then the life which is stably governed by the nature which is centered in the good of the whole. So, I will begin by drawing a straight line representing the life governed by the self-centered nature. Now, there is struggle in that area of life because you see, body, mind, and emotions are instruments. Now, they can be used by the self-centered nature or by the nature centered in the good of the whole. But the self-centered nature never fully controls body, mind, and emotions. In fact, it is itself controlled by the wishes for comfort and convenience on the part of the body, by the demands of the mind, and by the outbursts of the emotions. So here you have a struggle between body, mind, and emotions and the self-centered nature, which uses them to a certain extent without ever being fully able to control them. In this area of life, you can do the physical, mental, and emotional growing up. Not only that, you can get an occasional confirmation from the higher nature when you touch some truth from the outside, as I did on the Golden Rule when I was still in grammar school. You can also get an occasional direct perception from the higher nature, as I did when I was 16 and a senior in high school. At that time, I went around asking everyone who mentioned God in my presence, what is God? Because I was anxious to find out something about the nature of God. But I got no answer. I didn't give up because I knew intellectually that originally it must have meant something. So I pondered deeply upon it. I went to bed and slept over it, and in the morning from the inside, I had my answer. Now, I realize that your life is very much governed by your early trainings at this point in your life, but there are still some times when you can get either confirmations from the higher nature or direct perceptions from the higher nature. Now, if you're going to begin the psychological growing up, you come to the point where you feel completely willing, without any reservations, to leave that self-centered life, which I accent. And then you go into a direct struggle between the two natures with the two different viewpoints. So now there are hills and valleys in your life, lots of hills and valleys. This struggle can be more or less stormy. Mine was about medium, and some think of it as an ascending experience, with each hilltop becoming a little bit higher than the last hilltop. Let me express this struggle in the words of a college student. She pointed to this struggle I had drawn here, and she said, I know exactly what you mean by it because I'm in it. One time, all I think about is, I want a new dress. I want a new pair of shoes. And the next minute I'm thinking, what's the matter with me? A lot of people in this world have no shoes. Why should I be thinking about such superficial things? Once self-centered and once centered in the good of the whole is what that struggle is really all about. Then, if you keep on going, you come to the point where you rise high enough in consciousness to look at the entire universe through the eyes of the higher nature, which I accent. That's a wonderful experience. It's called the peak experience by some of the scientists. Some of the religious people call it the illumination experience. It's a feeling of complete and absolute oneness with all creation. Now, I knew I was one with all fellow human beings before I got there. But now I felt a kinship with the rest of creation, the creatures that walk the earth, the growing things of the earth, the air, the water, the earth itself. You would never be a polluter after that. You have a different attitude towards your environment. And most wonderful of all, a oneness with that which permeates all and binds all together and gives life to all. Well, you still slip in and out of this wonderful experience. And then you get on to the plateaus. Now, you are in harmony most of the time, and yet there are times when you still do slip out of harmony. And finally, you succeed in changing your life, or bringing your life into harmony, or finding inner peace, which I also accent. Now you have come through the inner growth pattern. You discover now that learning and growing does not cease. The struggle is over, but the learning and growing continues harmoniously without struggle. And it was at this point in my life that my pilgrimage began. I would not have been ready for it before. Now, coming through this inner growth pattern means not only bringing your life into harmony with the laws which govern this universe, which are the same for all of us, it also means finding and fitting into your special place in the life pattern which is unique for every human being. This is the self-centered nature. This does not know your job in the life pattern. This is the nature centered in the good of the whole. This does know your job in the life pattern. It just needs to be awakened. Now, the self-centered nature is partly conscious and partly subconscious. And into the subconscious part of the self-centered nature go all of your trainings from little child on. And it's usually a hodgepodge of things which will lead to harmony and things which will not lead to harmony, and even, in some cases, sets of opposites. And yet, these things govern your life, unless they are uprooted, which is a difficult thing to do, but of course it can be done. Now, the sets of opposites, which seem to confuse us the most, in this culture at least, are still the same two sets of opposites that confused the people of my generation. Although I think the training in this direction, at least in the direction of the first one, is not as severe as it was when I was young. On the one hand, I was trained to believe that I should be kind and loving and never hurt anybody. And wouldn't it be wonderful if we people of the world lived that way? But on the other hand, I was trained to believe that if so ordered, it is indeed honorable to maim and kill people in war. They used to give medals for it. Now, this confused most of the people of my time. It's confusing fewer people today. But it did not confuse me. I was very fortunate